Now to a less controllable scenario, which is to shoot only with aviable light. The worst case to shoot is during midday, because you have a very harsh light, which generates washed out colors that are less saturated. This issue could only be fixed with the polarizer filter. The light comes directly from the top, giving your subject raccoon eyes that does not look very nice. So there is also no possibility of shooting on the far side, because there is no far side. I love always to place the sunlight behind the subject, as you know. In this case, this isn't possible. Generally, I try to avoid shooting outside during the midday with a few exceptions. If you shoot a street with tall buildings or a mountain with a lot of near columns, the midday light is the only light that reaches these places and gets reflected from the walls, which can look good but still very harsh. And also forests and water of lakes or the sea look good and give you very intensive saturated colors in these lighting conditions. Still, it has many light reflections which you can control with additional polarizer filter, because when the day goes on and the sun rises, you get less of these intensive colors on the water and the greens and more shadows, so it doesn't look that colorful anymore. A lake can turn from a blue look into a greenish look. The only thing to avoid midday light is by shooting in an area with a lot of shadows, like a forest or interior shot. I like especially places for interior shots which have some natural light that comes through the windows above the building, that looks like a skylight, which is the best during the midday, because the light comes right through them. Also, complex gimbal movements have some benefits during midday, because there are no shadows from yourself that can appear in the shot. As soon as the sun slightly rises to one side, you can get again shadows on the subject. The shadow side rule can be applied again and allow you to get better image. Still very harsh, but better than when the sun is straight above the subject. Cloudy coverage can be very good for shooting people and complex gimbal moves because of the soft light. But sunlight will give your image more life and color, so in some cases you must wait until the sun comes out of the clouds to get the shot you need. Sometimes it's worth to wait. Also, rain or snow can give an image more depth to it. It also looks amazing in slow motion shots. The other thing is, if you have to shoot in midday, is to work with diffusion over the subject to get rid of the harsh light. But sometimes that needs additional powerful artificial light to counter against the sun to get the best results. That is the way they do it for more elaborate movie productions. So depending on the project you're doing, the best case is to avoid shooting during this time or control the light, which recommends a lot of additional gear. A way better time to shoot is the golden hour. This is roughly 1 hour before the sun sets and roughly the hour after sunrise. The light is golden, very flattering and also dramatic. Because the angle from the light is low, it's easy to shoot on the shadow side of the subject, which gives you the most depth in the image. But if the sun is in a such low angle and you place the sun directly behind your subject, it can happen that your subject is too underexposed and you get many flares and less contrast for your taste. To minimize this effect, you can bounce the sunlight behind the subject back to the subject with any sort of reflector. Make sure that the reflector is placed above or at eye level from the subject and not below, otherwise it can look very unnatural. Or use no bounce at all and go for the silhouette look that the low angle of the sun creates. Another way is to place the light directly 90 degrees off from your subject. This gives the split light effect, also called cross light. Also on landscapes and other objects, the low angle of the sunlight placed sideways gives you a lot of structure in the image, which looks very amazing. And by the way, you also don't get your own shadows in the shot. The golden hour in the morning has a different angle than the golden hour in the evening, which is a point to consider when you plan your shot. A good way to get exact angles is the app Photopills for Apple and Sun Surveyor for Android. Here you see exactly where the sun rises and sets and even more. Most of the time the golden hour at the morning has fewer people around compared to the golden hour at evening, and you can mix these shots without problems. Mostly no one will notice if it was morning or evening. But also the shadow side is a rule, and as you know, rules are here to break. Sometimes also a shot with the sunlight can look good, but mostly against the sun looks more interesting because you get more depth. The light changes the color temperature during the sunset from around 5600K to about 3800K or lower. If you have your camera at auto white balance, it will correct for this shift, which makes out of this beautiful golden light boring white light. You should avoid that at all costs and set your white balance always manually. So let it be on 5600K daylight balance. This way you get a more golden light that looks more what you see in real life. The sun looks also golden and not pure white. The next really great time to shoot is the blue hour, also called twilight. It's also twice a day, in the morning time, roughly the hour before the dawn, and in the evening time, roughly the hour after the dusk. The light turns into a very bluish soft light, which is an amazing look. The sky has texture in it compared to the pitch black night. Because of that, it's the best time to shoot exterior night scenes, otherwise you don't have any texture in the sky. It's better to shoot night scenes during the blue hour and bring the exposure down in post to retain some information in the sky. It looks better than a pitch black sky, and you can use a lower ISO value than at night, giving you less noise. You also have image with more information in the shadows, so there is more dynamic range, which is the difference between the darkest and brightest points in the picture, because there is more light. The only downside is you have only 1 hour time. Depending on what you want to record, it can become tricky to get everything. During the night you get a lot more black in the footage, which looks like less dynamic range. During the blue hour you can set the white balance between 8000K, which gives you a very warm image, and 3200K, which gives you a very bluish image. The correct white balance is somewhere between. If I shoot at night, I normally let it on 4500K, so I can correct it better for the look that I'm going for in the post. There is one crucial difference between the blue hour in the morning time and the blue hour in the evening time. In the morning time, most places turn off the artificial street lights really early, so you can't shoot the blue hour combined with the city lights. But in the night time, they turn the artificial lights on, so you can get a contrast to the already blue light, which can look very nice, but it depends on which look you are going for in the scene. If you shoot in a natural environment without any artificial light, you have to shoot at the blue hour. After that you need to use artificial light, otherwise it's too dark that your camera can film something with a usable ISO value. Otherwise it's way too noisy to get a professional looking image. In this case, also something like the A7S III is not usable anymore. You really need some light sources in the pitch black darkness. The last time to shoot is the most challenging one, the night time. Because you don't have any information in the pitch black sky, try to avoid it as much as possible by framing your shot. The exception is when you have a lot of moonlight, which gives the sky some texture, but this happens only when there are some clouds. But I give you 5 tips to get the most out of your night shots. The first is to use prime lenses with a fast aperture from 1.8 up to 1.2 or more. This way you can capture the most possible amount of light through the lens. I avoid shooting with f4 lenses at night time at all, because you get too less light through the lens. The second one is to avoid shooting in higher frame rates than 24 and 25p, because if you shoot at 50 or 60p, each picture gets less time to be exposed, which results in a higher ISO value and more noise. So stick to the basic frame rate if possible. The third one is to set your shutter speed a tad lower than normal. In case of 24-25p, instead of using 1/50th, use 1/40. But this requires steady shots and little to no movements of your subject. Otherwise you get too much motion blur, especially with fast movements of your subject. The fourth is to raise your ISO value to the maximum that you feel comfortable with. That is different from camera to camera, meaning you have to know your camera. It helps when you take test shots at different ISO values, bring it into your computer screen and look at the noise you get, and decide what is usable and what is too much noise for your taste. I use the A7S III and the FX6. With these cameras I can use ISO values up to 12,800 with no problems. The footage is still usable up to 25,600, but most of the time I stick to 12,800. But generally it's better if you give a bit more ISO during the record and bring the exposure down in post, instead of using less ISO and try to lift up the exposure in post, as you see in this example. And the last tip is to use denoise software in the post to reduce the noise you get. I use Neat Video and I'm very happy with it. How to use Neat Video correctly I show you in the editing chapter. Because you have a lot of mixed light sources at nighttime, I set my white balance to 4500K, which is between warm and cooler lights, which is with the 10-big camera easy to correct in the post to the look that you are going for. And now some other little inputs from my side to shoot at nighttime. Use AVB lights to light your subject if it has some like in a city, and try also here to light it so that you can film from the far side, and avoid placing your subject in very dark shadowy places during the nighttime, otherwise it goes down in the dark. If you are at a location at night with really no lights, you don't have any other possibility apart from using artificial lights. Then you can also make use of a fire, torches or lights that can be powered with batteries, or use a generator to power your lights. Now you should definitely be able to use the AVB light. If you learned something, subscribe to the channel, let a like here, and now let's create.